All right, someone get Irony on the phone because she's going to want to hear this.
CNN has learned that the U.S. military has significantly depleted its stockpile of key missiles during the war with Iran. And according to experts, this reduction is so severe it has created a near-term risk of the U.S. running out of ammunition should a future conflict arise in the next few years.
The United States, right, the country that spends more on its military than the next several countries combined, almost triple that of China, the country in second place, spending close to $1 trillion. Well, they may be running low on some of the exact weapons that it needs most. Yeah, you can't make this shit up. Let me tell you, the US military has significantly depleted its stockpile of key missiles during the war with Iran and created a, quote, near-term risk of running out of ammunition if a future conflict should arise. This is according to experts and 3 people familiar with recent internal Defense Department stockpile assessments. See, over the last 7 weeks of the war with Iran, the US military has used at least 45% of its stockpile of precision strike missiles, at least half of its inventory of THAAD missiles, which are designed to intercept ballistic missiles, and nearly 50% of its stockpile of Patriot air defense interception missiles. All of this is according to new analysis conducted by the Center for Strategic and International Studies. Meaning, in layman's terms, yeah, the war with Iran has burned through US missile stockpiles like Pete Hegseth burning through a 40 rack at the weekend. And it could take 4 to 5 years to replace some of those systems. Now, rest assured they will, of course, because there's never a question of how will we pay for this when the conversation is about war. Just when it's about saving Americans' lives at home via better healthcare or, I don't know, feeding the poor.
Yeah, Brianna, so according to this new study by the Center for Strategic and International Studies, which was, their findings were confirmed by 3 sources familiar with recent Pentagon assessments of U.S. stockpiles, the U.S. is running dangerously low on some of these key munitions that would be required to confront a near-peer adversary in the short term, like China, for example. So while the U.S. does still have sufficient munitions to continue bombing Iran, for example, if the shaky ceasefire were to fall apart, if they were to need to confront an adversary like China or like Russia, for example, then that could pose significant problems for the United States. Now, just to give you an example of how much the U.S. stockpile has been depleted over the last 7+ weeks of war on Iran, according to this assessment and the sources that we spoke to, the U.S. military has expended at least 45% of its stockpile of precision strike missiles, at least half of its inventory of THAAD missiles, which are designed to intercept ballistic missiles, and nearly 50% of its stockpile of Patriot air defense interceptor missiles, which are, of course, very key air defense munitions. Now, the U.S. military has also expended approximately 30% of its Tomahawk missiles stockpile, which are those long-range munitions that are really key to attacking targets further away. More than 20% of its stockpile of long-range joint air-to-surface standoff missiles, and approximately 20% of its SM-3 and SM-6 missiles. Now, this is important because these munitions take a while to be replaced. And according to our sources and this analysis, it would take anywhere between 1 to 6 years to replace a lot of these munitions. And so this is a really big problem that we should note that the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, General Dan Kane, he actually warned about as the administration was preparing to potentially go to war with Iran. He was raising concerns, we're told, about this issue of depleted stockpiles around the world, particularly ones that could be very useful to U.S. allies like Israel and Ukraine. So the Pentagon is preparing to ask for a supplemental from Congress for additional funding to try to replace these munitions, but it could still take quite some time before those are actually back in U.S. stockpiles, Brianna.
But according to the Wall Street Journal, this has been coming. I mean, they stated that the U.S. was, quote, rapidly expending air defense interceptions and straining its munitions supply during operations in Iran. And in a separate analysis, the journal warned that it was worse than you think. I mean, that's not coming from critics. That's coming from one of the most pro-defense, pro-establishment outfits in the country.
It's incredibly frustrating, Sean. And if the American people want the truth, they definitely should not pick up the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal or watch CNN, especially these days in the midst of this incredibly successful military operation against Iran. It's almost like these legacy American media outlets were rooting for the Iranian regime over the American people, over our great United States military, because they are so rooted in their opposition to President Trump rather than seeking and reporting on the facts. The facts are the United States of America tonight have never been so close to making a truly good deal, unlike the horrific deal signed by Barack Hussein Obama, than we are right now. Why? Thanks to President Trump's brilliant negotiating tactics and thanks to the success of Operation Epic Fury, a mission that he launched after 47 years of Iran being at war with the United States of America and having presidents for 47 years who lacked the courage to do what President Trump finally had the courage to do.
But let's just take a step back here, right, and look at the very glaring contradiction here. The US, the largest defense budget in the world, the most advanced military technology in the world, the most expensive global presence, and yet it is still constrained by supply. And listen, while I am all for conversations about how to cut into the $1 trillion military budget to, I don't know, take care of people here at home, it is interesting that the red-blooded patriots aren't out here sounding the alarm on this matter, because doesn't this make the country less safe? I mean, experts have been clear, if another major conflict were to break out, God forbid it doesn't, the US could face serious constraints, all because this administration has dragged the country into a war without congressional approval, depleting ammunition over something that was sold as some short-term mission, but still has no end in sight.
It's going to be finished pretty quickly.
I do see a deal in Iran, yeah.
Mr. President.
Could be soon.
We are going to finish the job, and we're going to finish it very fast. We're getting very close.
I think it's close to over, yeah. I mean, I view it as very close to over.
I will say the war in Iran is going along swimmingly. We can do whatever we want. And it should be ending pretty soon.
And they said, wow, that's going to be bad. I said, yeah, it's going to hurt the market, and it's going to drive up the price of oil and whatever it is. But that's peanuts compared to what would happen if we let this happen. And I told them, 47 years other presidents wanted to do it. They never had the guts, the courage.
And by the way, where's Doge? I mean, how are we running out of weapons with $1 trillion budget? Where is that money going? And by the way, this fits a broader pattern that we've seen regarding this war when it comes to this administration. They declare victory early, escalate operations, burn through resources, then face potential long-term consequences.
They concern me, and for more reasons just than running out of ammo fighting Iran. Part of this is a math problem that we knew the answer for before this war started, right? We knew what our stockpiles were, and I used to work with the folks at the Defense Intelligence Agency who used to do their best to count how many missiles and drones Iran had. And so, like, there's really two things that I want to draw out of here. One is that the folks, politicians and experts who were advocating for war with Iran, they were just kind of detached from reality. We've run out of up to 50% of strategic defensive interceptors a month into a war with a regional power, right? This is Iran. And from that, we also got to kind of extrapolate folks who are advocating for war with China. That is a global power. The fact that we are totally unprepared for these conflicts is not an argument for us to gear up for war, but it should make us a little more introspective when we have people saying it's going to be a slam dunk and we really need to fight these wars. The other thing I want to pull out of this, I think, you could be watching this report about us running out of all these critical munitions and say, well, wait a minute, don't we have the most powerful military in the world? Don't we have the biggest military in the world? We just spent nearly $1 trillion on the Pentagon last year. Why don't we have enough ammo? And I think it's important for folks to understand, especially as we move into talking about supplemental funding or a new defense funding bill, that these hundreds of billions of dollars that Congress gives the president for war largely do not go into things that we would say we need for war. The reason that we don't have enough air defense interceptors is because instead we've been spending that money on like these big projects that are kind of designed to be expensive. I hate to describe it this way, but a lot of this $900 billion budget, and that's what Congress passed last year, nearly every Republican and over 50% of Democrats too, kind of becomes a slush fund for defense contractors. Raytheon, Lockheed, and instead of producing the defensive capabilities that you say we might need, instead of doing things like paying to get black mold out of the soldiers' barracks, instead of going towards getting better bomb shelters for the hundreds of U.S. troops who've been wounded in this war, we're building big vanity projects like the F-35 stealth fighter, which we learned pretty early on in this war is not that stealthy. Iran caught it on camera and shot at it, or like Ford-class aircraft carriers that the toilets don't work on. And so I think it's really important to understand if you see these numbers and are shocked or worried by them, more money is not the answer.
And even now, by the way, the war is still ongoing, meaning stockpiles are still being used and replacement timelines stretch years into the future.
Love this video? Support independent media and unlock exclusive content, ad-free videos, and custom emojis by becoming a paid member of our YouTube channel today. You can also gift memberships to others. Let's keep growing together.